Good afternoon and welcome. On behalf of the National Catholic Educational Association, thank you for joining us for today's professional development webinar, Transforming Your School into a Dual Language School, one grade at a time, as part of our Hispanic and Latino engagement series. We are thrilled to have you with us today, especially as we continue important conversations that reflect the richness and diversity of our Catholic school communities. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on ncea.org through your member portal. Next, we welcome your questions throughout the webinar. Please use the Q&A box we will address all questions as time permits. And please note that the chat box is disabled, but the Q&A box is there for all of your thoughts and feedback. And finally, at the end of today's session, you'll receive a link to a short survey and instructions to obtain your certificate of completion. At this moment, I'd like to introduce our wonderful speakers. First, our host, Maria Del Amo, NCEA Director of Hispanic and Latino Engagement. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you, Christy.
No, thank you. Dr. Elena Sada, Program Director and Instructor of the Two-Way Immersion Network of Catholic Schools at the Roche Center for Catholic Education at Boston College. Welcome, Dr. Sada. And Dr. Carrie Fuller, Managing Director of School Networks for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Welcome, Dr. Fuller. Thank you so much for being here with us today, ladies. We'll start our time together in prayer. If you'll join me in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. From Matthew chapter 5. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Heavenly Father, we thank you for gathering us today in the spirit of service, learning, and community. As we begin this webinar, we invite your presence to guide our hearts and our minds. Help us to be a light to others, as you have called us to be, a light that reflects your love, your truth, and your hope. Bless our speakers, our participants, and all those who work tirelessly to build inclusive, faith-filled communities. May this time together inspire us to lead with compassion, wisdom, and courage. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. And we'll dive right in. Thank you so much. Please join me in a warm welcome for our panel host, NCEA's very own Maria Del Amo.
Oh, thank you, Christy. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on a Monday. We are bringing you a webinar that is dear to my heart. And if you have ever dreamt of transforming your school into a dual language community, Dr. Carrie Fuller and Dr. Sara are here for you to just walk you through the steps, and getting it done right is a journey, but it's a beautiful journey. So with that, Carrie, Elena, please take it on.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Christine. Carrie, would you like to start? I was introduced, so with no further ado, we will start with the objectives.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everybody. So just what we're going to be going over today is understanding and identifying what is dual language Catholic education. Some of you might already know that, but a little review and what are its benefits. And then we're going to really dive into the 3 stages of transitioning to dual language. So first, exploring, getting that feasibility study and recommendations done. Planning, how do we plan for the actual implementation? And then really importantly, sustaining it, reviewing your program over time. Number 3, we're going to end by reflecting on a potential application to your school or system and considering how the two-way immersion network of Catholic schools out of Boston College may support your next steps. So what is dual language? Well, there's many forms of bilingual education, some that transition kids into English only over the years, but dual language is a form of bilingual education where students are taught literacy and content in 2 languages for at least 50% of the day, starting in preschool, pre-K, and they can extend, most go to 8th grade, but they can also extend all the way to 12th grade. And We're going to talk a little bit about the why today. First of all, there's 3 pillars of dual language education that are accepted in the field. The high academic achievement. We have high expectations of our students. We're not saying, oh, because we have multiple languages, we don't think they can do as much. No, we think they can do more. And we know they can reach grade level expectations in both languages. We also have the pillar of bilingualism and biliteracy. So it's not just oral language, it's also the reading and the writing that we find important. And then third is sociocultural competence, that we can empathize, that we are curious about other cultures, that we understand that the world is multilingual, multicultural. And that's all embedded on this layer of critical consciousness, that we don't accept things as the status quo. We don't just say, oh, English is the more common language, more powerful language. No, like that we're analyzing things and we're teaching kids to think differently and to think why can't we say the Pledge of Allegiance in Spanish? We can still be good American citizens and have multiple languages. So having that critical consciousness, asking the why and understanding the reasons behind things. And that's all in our Catholic faith. So our foundation, our roots is really the Catholic faith. And we'll go into that a little bit more. So I always say there's nothing more Catholic than dual language education. So DLI is so Catholic. And we can start by even thinking like our Pope. We can't think of a Pope that's monolingual. Our popes are always multilingual. And I live here in Los Angeles, and in any given Sunday, 42 churches are celebrating Mass in multiple languages. So our church is multilingual. Our church is multicultural. And so it also aligns with Catholic social teaching, which is talking about the dignity of every child. And so Catholic schools are urged to undertake the special effort necessary to help students guard their cultures and languages for the enrichment of the world. And so that's really the why of Catholic dual language. We are called to guard our students' languages and cultures, and what better way to do that than in welcoming and teaching in 2 languages. And for those of you who might be wondering, well, we have our WASC coming up, or our WCA, our accreditation. And how is this, if we try to transform our school into a Catholic dual language school, how will this look? Will we be able to maintain our accreditation? And the answer is absolutely yes. Again, we said Catholic dual language education is good education. And so the guiding principles for dual language education is kind of like the Bible of dual language. It really is all of the research compiled into the guiding principles that then, what are the core components of a successful dual language program? And as you can see, this crosswalk that was done by our good friend, Dr. Howard from the University of Connecticut, she took the national standards and benchmarks for Catholic schools and the guiding principles and showed where they align. So for instance, the guiding principles begin with program structure, and that is aligned with our mission and Catholic identity, as well as our governance and leadership. There is 2 chapters, one on curriculum and one on instruction in dual language, and those are aligned to academic excellence. So as you can see, staff quality and professional development aligns with operational vitality in our NESBECs. So again, not only in practice, like our masses, our Pope being multilingual, even in our documents and our core documents of Catholic schools, for our accreditation and for our guiding are aligned with the guiding principles for dual language education. And I like to also say not only that DLI is so Catholic, that DLI is so traditional. I know it sounds funny. We always talk about it as an innovation, but it's actually just going back to our roots because our education in our country was traditionally bilingual. And in the first half of the 1900s, monolingualism and bilingualism were misappropriated. And so there became a law in the 1970s that it's an educational right to be able to honor and use children's mother tongues. So while there's been attempts over the years to ban bilingual education in schools, it's usually been temporary. And today the growth is really exponential. And I know in California, our governor has wanted to say 30% of our schools should be dual language schools by the time 2030. So there's really this growth in dual language education and bilingual education. And it really comes back to our roots. The early Catholic schools, Germanic schools were, the nuns came from different parts of Europe and then taught in the children's mother tongue. So that was very common. And at one point in Boston, there were 69 native language Catholic schools where there were a Polish school and the sisters taught in Polish. So this is actually not a new concept. It may feel new in the Catholic world, but it's actually going back to our roots of how how many of our Catholic schools taught immigrant children many years ago. And again, when we think about the why and the benefits of dual language, like I said, it aligns with Catholic social teaching. It has economic benefits. So there's benefits in terms of often people are paid more. Often, think in many big cities you have more career opportunities. The social emotional benefits. There's been a lot of research for dual language that when children are bilingual, they have better ability to take one another's perspectives. For any of you who've learned second, third, fourth language, it's also it's humbling. So there's also a humility there, and that's a social benefit, right? The educational and academic benefits, children have larger vocabulary, they have better executive functioning skills. There's a lot of things that can really help even beyond language acquisition. There's cognitive benefits. There was a study that was really got a lot of press around bilingual people have a greater chance of delayed onset of Alzheimer's or dementia, and so it can have a protective quality. We'll see in the next slide about stronger English language outcomes for English learners. And so a lot of people might think, well, if my student doesn't speak English as a first language, then they need more English. And actually, it's counterintuitive that building on someone's home language, whether it's Spanish or Mandarin, French, and then adding English actually helps them, and they outperform students who might have only been immersed in English. Equalizes access and participation. It really brings different communities together and allows everyone to access the different languages in their area. And then greater family engagement and connection. And I see this a lot going back to the Catholic aspect of dual language, that many of our students, their grandparents are the ones taking them to church and are really fostering the faith. And isn't it beautiful when they can pray together in their mother tongue? So I'd like to sum up that the 5 C's, the why, are the cognitive, career, college, culture, and Catholic. So that's kind of a summary and of that slide there. And then going to the why again, and this is going back to that the English learners, right? That dual language programs are the most effective way for our English learners or our emergent bilinguals to learn English. Again, it can be counterintuitive, but I think this chart kind of says it all. If you look at the top line that goes above is the two-way dual language schools, which means you have populations that are English dominant and populations that are Spanish dominant learning together. And that makes sense. They're teaching one another, they're supporting one another, and those are the most successful. But also, that is above average are your one-way dual language schools, where A one-way dual language school would be the majority of the students are either learning Spanish or the majority of the students are learning English. And those are also highly successful. So as you can see, dual language schools rise above the rest. Then you have these other models that do support some of your first language. So early exit bilingual education, where, you know, you're kind of, again, the idea is to quickly get you into English. So use some of your home language to get you into English. And as you can see, no services, just, as we say, throwing kids in the deep end, like a child that might speak Spanish home and just putting them in an immersive ESL without, immersive English only classroom without any supports, has the least effectiveness. So with some first language support, you do get, it's kind of, it doesn't rise above the 50 percentile rank, but it does, it's kind of keeps you constant. Whereas really you can see the two-way dual language or the one-way rising above the rest. And that is over time, as you can see. That's after, you know, 5th, 6th grade. So as we'll talk about, as you're implementing, you want to have the long view. You don't want to cut people off before they, but cut students' opportunities off before they've really had time to learn and grow in that language. And it takes time. So I think all things good come to those who wait and work for it over the long haul. Great, now I'll pass it over to Dr. Sada.
Thank you, Carrie. Before I go into the section of the how, I want to expand a little bit on this slide because many people ask, and maybe you're wondering, why is this so? And they attribute it to two factors. One is socio-emotional, and the other one is cognitive. So we know those who've studied, you know, having a PhD means that you know a lot about very little. So we know a lot about this very little. And what we know, Gary and I, from this very little that we've spent years studying, is that when you have the opportunity to do explicit instruction side by side of the two languages, you develop metacognitive and metalinguistic abilities, which benefit your growth, cognitive growth in general, but also your ability to master linguistically and language and vocabulary and so on. So these are the students that then later they do better at the SATs and so on. So that's something. But then the other very important piece is that we've noticed that, and Carrie said something very, very interesting. Early exit bilingualism is the message that we're transmitting to the students is, we want to fix you. We want to fix your bilingualism. We want you to be English monolinguals quickly so that you can succeed in this world. And we're sending that message where we could really be sending the message of, all you have, all you come with is God-given gift, and I want to capitalize on that linguistic background that you have. So those students sense that, and they do better because they are, their identity is being appreciated, not only respected, but really used. Their linguistic abilities are part of school, and that says a lot to them. So I just wanted to mention that as a token of how important it is to reflect on the holistic advantages of the language education. So there's 3 stages. Since you came to this workshop with the hope of understanding really well the stages of implementation, now we're going to focus on that, even though we could talk about dual language education and bilingualism in general forever. But there's 3 stages that we use in order to implement a dual language program. First, we need to explore. So the way I speak about this is, we don't necessarily say, oh, dual language is just for some people. Bilingualism is for some people, not for others. No, bilingualism is for everyone who has that desire to become bilingual. You just have to put, invest time and money into it, or money in this case is not the case, but time as a person, right? You need to invest time and interest, your heart into becoming dual language. However, there's a right time for it. When I'm a mother of 4, if my 4 kids are young and I'm working full time, maybe it's a really bad idea to try to learn Mandarin at the same time. So in the same way, the school has to be at the right time. And sometimes we have to create the right structure to be in the right time for that step. So during the exploration, that's what we do through the feasibility study. Then we plan implementation, which can take 1 to 3 years, depending on how far we are from the desired readiness. And then we need to learn, before we start, what would be the parameters to sustain it, so that when we start it, we actually can sustain it. So in this exploration, there's a QR code there that if you like, you can scan. You don't have to, you can just email us and we'll send the documents to you if you're interested. But we provide a guide, and in this guide, we are asking teams in schools and dioceses, we ask them, give me some data to help you, accompany you in this exploration. So we ask for data that pertains to the school in itself, both the families, the culture, the teachers, their dispositions, their readiness, their linguistic abilities, the parents, the immediate school community. Also, we collect data that pertains to the surrounding of the school, the parish, the culture around the school, the schools that surround the school, etc. And then, of course, the demographics in general of that area and where the school is located. All those factors help us see what is it that we need to do to be ready for an implementation. And the most important thing is team building and data collection. So when a principal comes to me and says, I am so convinced about this, and there's sometimes principals that done a PhD on curriculum and instruction and understand, or that haven't, but understand really well the advantages of it. And they come to us and they want to start. We always send them back and say, build your team, because this takes culture, and culture is created by teams. So find someone at the parish level, if it's a parish school, at the diocese, if it's a diocese school, your parents, your teachers, community organizers that might be inclined to also discovering these things with you, etc. So this is key, not because you're going to turn a dual language school into a dual language school. All your problems or all your challenges at the school will be solved. If there's challenges at the school that we need to address, we address them first, or simultaneously we create a path. Dual language doesn't come to be an aspirin to fix everything. In other words, sometimes the one thing that it does fix is a lack of interest in the community. The community is inclined to be bilingual, but other than that, we have to address everything. So that exploration, the feasibility study is what allows this. Now, the feasibility study is done as a team, once again, between the inquiry team at the school or diocese, and we provide our services. In our team, there's over 100 years of experience doing this, because we are 5 coaches, with some of us even 3 decades doing it. So I was a dual language teacher, dual language school administrator, district administrator, etc. So we've been doing this for so many decades. So when we see data, it talks to us in a special way, and we can share that understanding that we have when we see your data. And you see your data and you have other understanding that we don't have. So we have to work as a team to create this. We also talk very clearly about what are your goals. One of the first questions in the feasibility study is, why do you want to be dual language? And I always shy away when they say, oh, because we want more people in the school. It's not bad that we want more people, but we have to understand that it's not a means to an end, but it could be, but it's an end in itself, which is the identity affirmation of families and developing more skills, the ability to be more fulfilled in life, etc. So we ask questions like, who's driving the initial inquiry, and does the team represent the stakeholders or the companions, the partners in this walk? Is there anyone else that should be part of this team? Who should be at the table that isn't? A parent, maybe, the teachers, the languages, the teacher who is bilingual, my parish priest, etc. The bishop, if we think that we might have a difficulty finding a replacement at the parish of a priest that is for it, and that might hinder in the future, we might even involve the diocese if that's the case, because we don't want a situation where if it's a parish school, that a new priest comes along, and because of ignorance, they'll just switch everything. So all these questions need to be addressed. Reflect on the unique Catholic identity or charisma of your school. I learned that a lot from Carrie when she started her school with only 40 students, and now there's over 400 in that school. Who are we? Learn about, go back into maybe 200 years ago, my school was bilingual. Let me look into it. Revisit your mission and vision statements. Why are we considering dual language, and have that reflected in the vision and the mission? So once we do the feasibility study at the end, and you'll see a timeline at the end, we have a meeting for recommendations and for planning, the first stages of planning. Recommendations look like typically is, okay, these are the 4 things we need to do to be ready by the fall, or these are the 15 things that we need to have ready. Therefore, maybe we need 2 more years, but we still plan. So recommendations is something that we offer and that we hear from the team, and then we compare and we grow together. We learn from each other, and then we're very open to the decision of the diocese and the school, of course. There's been situations where we recommend that they wait, and they don't wait. And we help them still through the planning and implementation. But it becomes very difficult, and they can see the difficulty later. So it's very important to listen to all the participants in this team as we finish our feasibility study or our exploration stage. In the planning, we ask the question, what instructional language allocation model do we need to adopt? And I'll talk a little bit more about that, and then I'll show you some examples of what we mean. But instructional and language allocation model, language allocation means what language is it going to be, what's the percentage of that language that we're going to start with, what grade level, which is usually pre-K or K or both. Maybe sometimes if we're starting the school from scratch, pre-K through first, etc., but never all the grades at the same time. It's more than what our Catholic schools can handle at this point. So what's the allocation? Is 50-50, or is it immersion? There's some schools that choose language immersion, and in areas where I'm thinking of one school that started as a 50-50, and they realized that students were defaulting into English as early as 2nd grade, so they decided to do Spanish immersion so that students could feel stronger and compensate for the fact that it was in a very English Anglo community. So that's an example. Then what instructional program? That depends on what you've done traditionally, what works for you, what your diocese does. And also it depends on what model of dual language program you're going to adopt. And we will see that later, that there's several models that it's okay not to understand what they are right now, because they imply a day. Every model will be like a day of session just to get it, but to go into it. But we'll mention them, and then in the book that Gary talked about, the guiding principles, they do speak about it, and then we can also refer you to great resources to understand the different models better. These are all models that have been researched for 10 or more years, so we feel very confident promoting them. And once again, this is typically determined by the program's population, specific goals, culture, and resources. There's a school that was convinced, like the one I was referring to, was convinced that language immersion, in this case Spanish immersion, would be the best option, because most of the students were 3rd-generation Spanish speakers, so they didn't speak, or families were Spanish speakers, they didn't speak any Spanish, and they were defaulting into English because it was in an area where there was a lot of prejudice against Spanish. So they started 50-50 instead of immersion, because that was what the culture called for. And we had to respect that. 5 years later, they changed because they prepared the culture for it. So all those aspects influence the decision of the school. Another way of allocating this information the language models, the percentage of time, distribution of language within the instruction. Most of our Catholic schools do it by subjects in the upper elementary and in secondary. In the early grades, they can do it by themes as well. And this is something that we train the educators so that they know how to be successful once they, or which are the specific language allocation models and how to be successful with that specific model. The same with the instructional models. Some examples are Literacy Square, very successful, started by Kathy Escamilla in University of Boulder. They do mostly new immigrants in the country, and they do it by blocks. And this is, I spent a week with her. I shadowed her when I was the district supervisor in New York City. And I was very impressed because I saw how, for instance, how effective this could be. The teacher would start a lesson, for instance, a block in literacy, second grade it was, and they were teaching the syntax of a sentence. And he started in English, and then there was, a very effective, successful lesson on the structure, the syntax of a sentence, article, verb, etc. And then he finished the 60 minutes, did a bridge, say, okay, in Spanish, he said, this is what we learned in English. These are the words we learned. All of them are cognates, which means that they sound the same. Made a list of the words. So practically, if you understand this, you understand the syntax in Spanish. However, here's a game. And he wrote a sentence in Spanish. He said, what do you notice that's different? And the students got very engaged. There's no article. The adjective comes afterwards, and so on. Exactly. And he wrote bullets of what the students had said. That was it. The students learned syntax in 2 languages within 90 minutes with an effective instruction. So that was Literacy Square. Teaching for biliteracy is a little bit different. 2 teachers, one predominantly English, one predominantly Spanish. They team teach, and together they teach the same cohort different times in order to still teach 40 kids or 30 kids, whatever 2 classes imply. And they cover the materials, they divide the materials and the standards, and they usually love it. At the beginning, they're a little bit shy because they don't know what it's going to be like to have more students. Then they realize that they have the students, if it's a second and third grade, for instance, if you only have one class, third grade, they love it because they have the students for 2 years, so they really get to know them. If it's 2 classes in one cohort in one grade, they love it because then one focuses on the STEM standards and the other one focuses on the humanities standards. So all of these things have been researched, studied, and teachers have been using them and giving feedback. So we have a lot of information in order to help the schools become successful with their model. Gomez and Gomez is an enrichment model. They take a little bit of both, but they are very strict with which they use which language with which person. Steele is another model that is started mainly in California, and they also take the best practices. They've been around for a while and they have a lot of money, so they can do a lot of research and come up with an effective model. Then collaboration models. So do I have a bilingual teacher that can teach my class, or am I going to have 2 teachers, a Spanish and an English, working together? It's very difficult to find a good bilingual teacher, or a bilingual teacher that feels confident to teach both. We know that, and it's a challenge that we need to always face. In some regions, it's easier than others. In other regions, we've been very blessed because we've been hiring in our network, for instance, over 20, I think it was like 26% of our teachers are immigrants who were educators in their home countries, and they don't have the necessary English skills to become the ELS, English literature or English language teacher in 4th grade or 5th grade, but they teach Spanish beautifully. So they team teach with an English only teacher. So, and these teachers never leave our schools because they find an environment where they can bring their whole selves, their religion, their culture, their language, and their new experience as immigrants that they share with the families. So there's just a lot of advantages. If we're afraid because we hear it's hard to find teachers in general, imagine bilingual teachers, God provides in these beautiful ways, and we keep discovering that there's people that were meant to come to us and that they find a safe haven in our schools and they become our saviors. So we always have to take that step of faith and go for it if we think that's the best model for my students. This is an example that I borrowed from Vanessa Mallorquin, who presented here about a month ago about their dual language school, St. John Vianney in Orlando, where Maria is from, by the way. Very, very excited. And they've been doing this for years. Their oldest cohort, I think, is in 7th grade now. And they divide, as you see, the one language, blue is English, red is Spanish. In some areas, since in Mexico we use Spanish to do corrections in school, we propose green, but in that area it wasn't an issue, so they use red. Here's a specific example of how they divide the subjects by grade by languages. For instance, 3rd grade, they do English, science, and math in English, and Spanish, social studies and religion in Spanish. Then this is an example of how they distribute the schedule to be able to do half a day in Spanish and half a day in English every day of the week. So this is what some schools call, or districts call, the roller coaster model, because you finish with one language and you pick it up next day and so on, which it's an equal advantage to morning tiger hours kind of language situation. Others just keep it the same every day, depending on the grade or that data that they collect works well. So when we plan, now that we have a better understanding of how it can work, we need to, these are some of the decisions that we make in our final meeting of the feasibility once we know we want to start. So do we want to have a track that is dual language and have the rest of the school be still English only? Or do we want to do the whole school dual language? And that is an answer that usually comes with the size of the school. Small schools cannot afford doing a track because they don't, and then it becomes complicated if they have just enough students, because then they have too many people wanted to go to dual language, not enough to go into English only. So, there can be a little bit of a problem with classroom inequities. So my recommendation, if it's a small school, is always based on our experience. And, Carrie, you can add also to this, but is partner up with another Catholic school in the area that's not dual language, and they can send you the people who want to be dual language, and you can send them the people who want to be English only. And that's a beautiful way of following the example of the first Christians. That you could also we have to ask ourselves, what's our population, which is, it comes up with a feasibility study, because we survey the families, we survey the teachers, we provide the surveys, we analyze all the data, mostly from English speakers, Spanish speakers, etc. Looking at the time. Curriculum choices. Typically, it's so interesting. Sometimes they say, well, you have a curriculum I can adopt, especially when we have a new principal that has not had the experience in the diocese. We suggest to use the curriculum that they already use in the school, because otherwise too many changes for the teachers, or in the diocese or district, because they'll be able to share the same resources they have. They won't have to do a big investment in resources at the beginning. And then we just adapt strategies for instruction, and we allocate the languages. So there's a way to do it. This is the 3rd time we dedicated a curriculum team to work with new schools on just this. So once you get into it, it becomes like a second nature to know how to do it. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to say that we collect data, and we do ongoing collection of data, annual surveys to the families. We look into how proficient are the students in both languages, in both languages in the program. Why do parents want a Catholic dual language school? What are their concerns? What language these students first learn as babies? This will give us an idea of what language they might end up defaulting into. What languages do adults in the household currently speak to the children? what language does the child respond in. So all this helps us determine our language allocation, our model, our curriculum, etc. And also the intervention of the families, because we believe in the language schools in what we call funds of knowledge, which is, I'll give you a quick example. I promise, Maria, I won't go over my time, but I want to just use this example. When I was teaching in East Harlem, I remember I was teaching to 6th graders the slope, and I knew how to teach the slope really well, but I did not know how to use the slope in many practical situations. Normal, right? Even though I grew up with 4 engineers, I never took the time to learn about it. So one of my students' dad had finished only 3rd grade, but he was in construction there in New York. And I invited him to teach this unit with me. And just to think about it, I almost want to cry, because he explained to the students in Spanish, because he couldn't speak English very well. But so we did it during the Spanish allocated time, and how to measure to be able to get a roof. So it was all about the building roofs, and he was so knowledgeable, and it matched the lesson of the slope really well. One of the advantages that came from that is that the parent became very involved. It just brought this richness to the school. We didn't have a lot of commitment or involvement among the parents that had education only to 2nd or 3rd grade. And his son became a fan of his dad, if that's his dad's fan. And that's really important for the first generation immigrants. So all this data collection, all this information helps us really become what we said we would become when we adopt the Catholic education, families at the center. So it's really important. I love this slide. Carrie introduced me to it. And believe in your community. Launch with high expectations. Grade level standards and the language pedagogy from day one. Lower the affective filter. You have pre-K students that are crying because they don't know what it means, how to say I need to go to the bathroom in Spanish. It's okay. They can say it in English. It's all about making a game, like a game out of things, having fun, making it exciting. The teacher demonstrates how she's learning. I love when I have the English only teachers, on the teachers that can only speak English, model what it's like to learn one word or the other in Spanish. So she looks it up, she says it, the kid says it. So that's very important. Foster one unified school community via bilingual school assemblies, masses, and co-curriculars. So yes, we are unique as individuals in the school. We might have different groups, linguistic groups, ethnic groups, but we also have a school community. So we identify that school community identity, and we highlight it as much as the group's identity. One slogan that an amazing intercultural theologian uses a lot is, I am like all others in the school. I am like some others in my ethnic group. I am like no other. I might be Mexican American, but my family is a different Mexican American family than that Mexican American family. So that is what we try to do when we start when we believe in our community, highlight the communal identity and all the group and the individual identities without losing that beautiful balance. And then that leads us to the last step, which is sustainability. So if you're serious about exploring the language education, first of all, get a team. Don't scare your community by saying that you're going to do it. Just say, I'm exploring. I'm going to buy a book and collect data and see if we are ready, when we'll be ready. This is the book to buy. Everyone in the inquiry team, I think, should have one and read it. It will give a really good idea of what it's needed. And this is the QR code for that same book in PDF. The field of scholars that have been working on this couldn't have made it easier for us because it's free. And then that's one very important step for sustainability, because we use that to do our annual program review. Once a year, we get together, either in California or in Boston. we alternate. And maybe one day we'll do in the Midwest, I don't know. And we come together as schools and we had time to analyze and review our program, and together within your own small community of school, and then share with other schools, learn what we want to do for the following year to make it even better, and so on. Networking, therefore, is another really important thing for sustaining, because it's the only way to grow. You know, I had a really beautiful experience this year. I was diagnosed with cancer in February, but I am a researcher, so I researched what were the main elements in those that healed. The most important one was this sense of community and support. So I reached that right away, you know, and I created my own little community. I told them I might need you, my kids might need you, this is what's happening. And I learned so much through it. It's so humbling. But in the network, we all have so many strengths. We don't come as leaders in the network, the 5 coaches, myself. We don't come as more knowledgeable others. We come as someone who accompanies everyone, and they accompany us, and we accompany each other, because we have principals that have been in their role for 15 years. Well, no, because the network has been on for 12, but they've been as principals before their school was the language, and we can learn a lot from them. I still learn every day. So that is extremely important to do. We have 32 schools, and we try to visit all of them every year. It doesn't always work, but we invite them all to our monthly sessions, our coaching on demand and monthly, and also our resources, our webinars, monthly webinars, and the resources that we can exchange between each other. This is the last summer in Sacramento, we gathered. And this is a suggested timeline, but there's flexibility. Usually in September, we're gathering data and information. In October, we produce a feasibility study report and present to the board and partners. In November, we come to a decision. This is ideal, but usually this becomes more like December. December, we plan for fall implementation, marketing, community, culture implementation. In January, we're continuing with the marketing and develop infrastructure for implementation. Teachers, making sure we have. One very important thing that has not come up is we don't let go of the English teachers at all. Like, if you have an effective teacher that wants to stay at the school, that does not speak the language, let's say you're doing Spanish English, the language that does not speak Spanish, we don't ask them to. We never had to let go of someone because of the language implementation. Never. What we do is we use the natural attrition, and so that's part of the feasibility study. So what is our natural attrition? Who's staying? Who's leaving by natural attrition? Who speaks what language? Where do we need to fill in a position? Let's fill it in with bilingual or with Spanish only, etc., etc. So that is key. And then April, May, teacher training, scope and resources. June, the academy, more planning. July, August, networking, new teacher training for those that hire later, etc. Carrie and I published an article in Journal of Catholic Education, Carrie, I think, and you'll find the QR code there. It talks about all these steps of implementation in case you're interested. Here's our contact information, because we said a lot of things. Maybe you need to, we need to personalize or individualize more. So here we are. I'm not sure we have any questions. Let me see.
Actually, Elena, I do
Yes.
have one, and this is going back to when you were talking about the instructional models, and I know you mentioned different ones, but if I was a school contemplating becoming a dual language school, will the instructional model be a recommendation out of the feasibility study, or is that more about understanding your current human resources and how to place them in a way that fits a particular model over another?
Yes, that's a great question. Carrie, what would you say?
So if I understand the question correctly, like it's kind of a back and forth, right? So
Mhm.
you first have to look at, who you're serving in the community. And then you also are thinking about the resources at hand, the teachers you have. So for instance, we have at All Souls, we have this amazing a teacher who was a math specialist in Mexico. So since we could go either way with math being taught in English or Spanish, we have someone who's kind of an expert in that, in Spanish and teaching a math. So then that model, so that's why we chose her. So there is a little back and forth. You're looking at your community, right? I know a school who was teaching math in English, but then they realized, gosh, all of our students are Spanish dominant and our scores are kind of low. So they change. So it's also about that flexibility. You don't want to
Mhm.
every year make changes, but when you're first making that first decision, you're doing the best you can with the information you have gathered. And then let's say you are looking at a Gomez and Gomez model, and they're saying math is only in English, you adopt that. But over time, you may say, we're going to adjust this model to meet the needs of our students. So I think it's like a both and. You're going to look at the model and look at the resources and know that over time, we can't get
Have to
stuck
adjust.
to
Yeah.
solving in any one model.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. And you look at your data, when I was teaching, I remember there was, especially at the beginning as a teacher, if I had to explain something very complicated, I remember saying, oh, I'm going to front load it in the strongest language. And then I'm going to do all the practice and application in the target language or in the additional other language, so that they can practice we can spend more time practicing the language they're not as strong, but I want to make sure that they know the content, so that if you are a self-standing, we call bilingual teacher, you have that flexibility. Otherwise you have to make decisions like Carrie said, and also there's always a moment of the bridge where, even though I'm the Spanish teacher or the English teacher, if I can manage a little bit of the other language, I can spend these 10 minutes helping them make the connections of the language so that they don't lose anything before they go into the other language. And that has to be very explicit. So in the language education, this is really important. We don't translate, literally. Like, we don't say, go to the bathroom, del baño, because then the brains, research has told us, they just would shut down until you go to the language that you want to hear everything. So we never do that. There's a strategy to it when we do the explicit connection.
And let's say I'm gonna be the hard question here now. I'm a principal. I think this will be a great thing. I start on my feasibility study. And all my teachers are English language teachers. What do I do?
Yes. So what we've done is say, okay, do you know there's going to be attrition? Because sometimes it's a close community, and they know she's going to retire. This one is not happy, or her husband is in the military, and I don't know, different situations. So you say, okay, we can do pre-K and K, and then we will work something out for first. So then you give it a year at a time. But we've been in the situation, Maria, where we wait one more year to make sure that at least we can do 2 years of replacement. 1 year this year, one the next year. Replacement or team teaching, because sometimes like one Spanish teacher can teach 2 classes, because I can teach, let's say, K and first, or first and second, depending on where you are in the program. First and second, the English. And I was teaching, for instance, let's just say that I can only replace one teacher. Well, I replace the one teacher with a Spanish teacher so that she can do 2 grades Spanish, and I can keep the other teacher doing the English in both grades. So that's one very important aspect that we see in the feasibility during the exploration. And then another important thing is that dual language education doesn't imply a large budget. It implies the same budget as any school, but you do have to invest in training and resources at the beginning, always, because it's a utopia to think that the teachers will know how to do what I'm talking about, or what Carrie's saying, we had 30 years of practice. We need to get them started and walk the path with them to make sure they're successful. We don't want to set them up for success, and we don't want to set the students up for failure, and the same for the students.
Thank you, thank you. I know those were tricky questions, so I didn't mean to be mean.
No, it's a good question. Yeah.
I think talking to each teacher is super important because some will self-select out, like they just feel like, you know what? That's what we found is that there might be a teacher, even though DLI won't hit their grade till 6th grade, they just don't feel comfortable or want it. And so they use it as an opportunity. But it's about being really transparent and really getting that feedback and being honest about what the feasibility is showing, and honest and honoring the teachers who have served that school perhaps for a long time. So I think that those kind of, courageous conversations are really important.
Yeah. And we have a survey. Sorry.
Oh, no. I just wanted to say, and that reminds me, this summer I met the principal and the tough teacher, right? This is the teacher that has been teaching in that school for 30 years. She has grandchildren in the school. Her kids went through that school. And now all of a sudden she's being told that she needs to, start migrating into not migrating to a dual language program, but serving English, Spanish language learners, right? English language learners. And she was like, I don't know any Spanish. And the wall went up, and like you said, it's just listening and supporting that teacher and giving her the tools to feel comfortable. And now she even makes fun of it. She's like, oh, I have my kids teaching me Spanish.
Yeah, I was gonna say, actually, we suggest that they visit another school, and I usually say visit this classroom specifically because in that classroom, the English only teacher, because they tend to go to the Spanish class, like, no, visit the English only classroom. In that classroom, the English only teacher models really well what it means to learn a language, because she gets excited about learning a word or two. So the kids, the kids also are exposed to that, and so that appeases the teachers. And then we do survey all the teachers as part of the feasibility in such a way that they can write things that otherwise they wouldn't necessarily say. And then with those surveys in hand, we do a one-on-one. We suggest we accompany the principal if they want to, but if not, they meet with the teachers one-on-one to go over their dispositions. In that survey, we ask about their understanding, their dispositions, their fears, their skills, their linguistic ability, etc.
So we have one question from Jose Manuel, and Jose Manuel asks, can these strategies be implemented with languages other than Spanish? Our parish also has a strong Vietnamese population.
Absolutely. Carrie, why don't you share your experience? Because we do have 2 Mandarin schools and 2 Lakota schools.
Oh,
yes. So absolutely. I mean, you can do it at any language that the community desires. So one thing that was interesting was that in looking at in Los Angeles, some of the Vietnamese dominant schools or Korean dominant populations, when we surveyed them, those families actually said we'd actually like more Spanish. We'd like our children to learn Spanish. We will teach them Korean and Vietnamese on the Saturday schools and Sunday schools. So that was really fascinating because, the assumption. So it's all, again, about finding out what the community desires. They said, we're in Los Angeles and actually we'd like our children to be trilingual. So if you, in a couple of those communities, Spanish dual language Catholic schools were started because there are 10 in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And then the school I was at, it's right in the center of both a Mandarin Chinese speaking community and Spanish speaking community. And so at first, the superintendent, again, was going to start a Mandarin dual language school because there was another Spanish dual language school that they were going to start. So we said, okay, we'll do 1 Mandarin and 1 Spanish. And actually, again, it's listening to the community. The community came back and said, no, this parish has more Spanish language masses. Don't forget the actual community at this parish, even though the surrounding community is very multicultural, multilingual. So listening to the community, they said, okay, fine, we'll do both. We'll offer Mandarin dual language and Spanish dual language in the same school, which I found very invigorating and very exciting and a great way to bridge two communities that this school is in the middle of. So again, and in the Mandarin dual language school, that while there were quite a few Chinese students, there were also many students of other Asian populations from Vietnam, Korea, and so I think that Japanese. So that's interesting that they chose to learn Mandarin as well as also Spanish.
Yeah.
But it is a very diverse Asian population.
And St. Michael's in Queens, in New York, very close to Chinatown there. We have a Mandarin English school, but 25% of the students speak Spanish at home.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still in, so you find, once again, serving the community.
Thank you, Jose Manuel, for the question. I just want to, I know we're almost close to time, but if anybody else has any questions, last minute questions to pop into the Q&A. And if not, we will be wrapping it up.
Thank you, Maria. That's right. We welcome and invite anyone to leave any feedback in the Q&A, final thoughts, or even notes of appreciation for our speakers here today. If I may offer one final thank you to you, ladies, for equipping us truly with vision, both vision and that practical roadmap to confidently lead our schools towards bilingual, bicultural, and faith-filled future. So thank you for what your work is doing. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Christy. Anna Morel asked a question. Anna, since we don't have time, if you like, I just put my email in the chat, and I can answer via email. It's about determining 50-50 or 90-10. Both, you can't go wrong with either one. There's research that shows that both are successful. And it's just, as I say, culture, language dominance, etc. So yeah, we can talk about it.
Please feel free. We'd love to hear more. There's no time constraint, Dr. Sada, if you'd like to
okay.
into
so
it.
I'll just thank you. I wasn't sure. So I'll just say that and Carrie, you can add to this, but usually one of the first elements is who will be my teacher or my teachers. So if you don't have a bilingual teacher, you cannot do as efficiently a 90-10. So then if you only have English dominant and English and Spanish dominant teachers, dominant quote unquote, then the schools do a 50-50. And we have data that shows that both models are very effective. The 90-10, which is it's more like an immersion program, where you start 90% the target language. So for a dual language to be dual language, you need at least 50% of instruction in the target language, meaning Chinese, Spanish, Lakota, Korean, etc. So those schools increase their percentage of the target language by grade. So by the time they're at the end of third grade or at the beginning, they're 50-50. And then they continue 50-50. And that is important because the language allocation at that point gives them a possibility of transferring skills, learning everything, and so on. Most of our schools do 50-50 from the beginning just because of the shortage of bilingual teachers. But if you're lucky to have a bilingual teacher and they like the early grades, we always put them in pre-K and K, because that's where you want the kids to stay with their teacher, the same one, instead of splitting 2 years with two teachers. Another element is the culture. There's some parishes that if you say that you're going to do Spanish 90% of the time, they might not like it because it's very English oriented. English has been like you still hear things around. I live in Connecticut and we hear it a lot. Like, English is the bilingual, like my 6-year-old, just briefly, my 6-year-old in a store once asked me after 1 year in Connecticut, "Mom, don't speak to me in Spanish. They're going to think we're poor." So there's still a lot of prejudice in many places. So in those cases, sometimes they shy away from immersion. In other cases, they say, let's go for immersion because the students need to know how important it is for their lives. So all those things are considered. Yes. And then the language. I personally, when I have a lot of when I was determining my allocation in the schools I ran in New York, if I had a lot of English learners with both working parents, I would never do a Spanish immersion, just because they were pushing me a lot for good English scores by third grade. So I needed to do 50-50, so I could have 50% of the time doing the English foundations, more time, the typical phonics and so on. But if you do 90-10, that 10% is the foundations, so they don't get behind, because they are learning literacy. Literacy is the same in both languages except for phonics. It's very interesting. So you talk about character and setting and plot is the same in one language and in the other. Reading, skills for reading, but the phonics is not. And English takes 2 more years than Spanish. In Spanish, you can be a fluent reader by the end of before you turn 5 years of age, which is incredible. But English, you need until 2nd grade to really be more fluent. So therefore, in reading, if it's 90-10, that 10% is foundations. We increased to 20% at 20% by kindergarten. That 20% is foundations. If we go to 70-30, almost that 30% is foundations. So you still get their foundations, so they don't get behind. But it could be, in my case, they did not have enough vocabulary in English exposed, or Spanish for that matter, because their parents were both working parents, and they had come as immigrants after refugee camps and so on. So I insisted in having 50-50% in my case. But the school that I'm talking about is in San Antonio, and they switched to 90-10. And now you have, or the one in Sacramento. I went to Sacramento to see a 4th grade debate, and all the English speakers, I mean, not even the English speakers, used one single word in English when they were debating a very hot topic in 4th grade. And that's because they had done immersion and really installed that culture since an early age. So those are things that we have to look into.
Fascinating topic. We could be talking about this for like days.
Yeah, sorry.
No. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you so much for spending this afternoon with us. We really appreciate your time, and thank you for all our participants for sticking in through all these conversation. I think personally, I got the most out of just having a candid conversation and talking through some of our questions and inquiries. So I appreciate your time and for sticking around a little bit longer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And to our online participants, there's a survey link in the chat. Your presence and engagement inspire us to continue our mission, if you'd like to take a moment to complete it. And so on behalf of NCEA, may we continue to build the kingdom of God by shaping schools that not only educate minds, but also form faithful leaders, grounded in mission, guided by wisdom, and inspired by the Spirit. May God bless you, and may your work in Catholic education continue to strengthen, uplift, and transform our communities, one faithful step at a time. Goodbye, and God bless.
Thank you.